So when people say you're a friend of China, I always go, well, I'm a friend of China because having good U.S.-China relations are in the interest of the American people.
It is in the interest of the West itself to understand China. They should have the courage to come to China to know how the China model works and how most Chinese feel about their country.
In this episode, the first person we spoke to was Stephen Orlins, president of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. Mr. Orlins was among the earliest observers to witness the establishment of diplomatic ties between China and the United States in January 1979. During that period, he served in the office of the legal advisor of the U.S. Department of State and was a member of the American legal team that supported the two countries in their transition to full diplomatic relations.
The development of China is something that I never expected to witness. You know, that in 1979, when I would treat people to lunch or dinner, so I would invite, 我请客, this was the best meal that they got because there was, food and meat and other things still were rationed. You needed ration coupons to purchase some meats. You need ration coupons for rice. Now, they invite me to dinner and it's the greatest food imaginable. You can get absolutely anything that you want. The changes have been enormous. China's economic development has been simply extraordinary. I think China's development is based upon a view that, and it still is, of Deng Xiaoping, that reform and opening would help lift hundreds of millions of Chinese out of poverty. And that has been what has happened. I mean, it has happened in a way that many Westerners don't find appealing, but I think there are no Westerners who do not agree that it has succeeded in lifting these hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And, as a witness to it, I've always been absolutely amazed. I would not have predicted in 1979 that China would be what it is today. And that has to be something which foreigners respect.
Zhang Weiwei was a senior English interpreter for former Chinese leader and the architect of China's reform and opening up, Deng Xiaoping. He's now the director of the China Institute of Fudan University. In a conversation in his office, he shared his views on the rise of China and the reasons behind some of the ideological biases towards China that have since become prevalent in many Western countries.
You always have quite sizable number of people who understand China very well. Like, Mr. Stephen Orlins. This is very rational and sophisticated conversations about the Sino-US relations, about other subjects. The problem is in the Western countries, including the United States, there is a rise of populism and polarization of politics. As a result, for one reason or another, very often these rational, sophisticated voices somehow are not valued as much as before, which is deeply regrettable. The Chinese story had not yet been told very well to the outside world, especially in a language, in a way that foreigners can understand. Yet on the whole, I think it's mainly a problem on the part of the West. Because the rise of China is indeed so unexpected, because they could not believe a so-called communist country, a socialist country. So they have a lot of ideological, cultural obstacles to grasp the real meaning and essence of the rise of China. So this is, I think, both China and the West should improve their way of dialogue, deepen their mutual understanding.
I think that China, the Chinese government, needs to have a better ear to the perception of China from outside. Some of Chinese policies have led foreign think tanks to concluding that it is a threat. Even though I support the Belt and Road Initiative, there are many who see it as an expansion of Chinese power and the creation of ports which are intended for the PLAN to use. China needs to be sensitive to the reaction to its actions, that it is not 1980 anymore, it's 2021, and it needs to be sensitive to the global reaction to its activities.
No, for the BRI per se, it's a great initiative. As you know, if you look at the international community as a whole, you have vast numbers of developing countries. They are in acute shortage of infrastructure, and China can supply this kind of demand. And China put forward this great idea of what's called the discussing together, building together, benefiting together. It's a great principle, golden rule for international cooperation. And whatever the Western propaganda or bias, distortion about BRI, it's working. Over 100 countries have signed all kinds of agreements with China, and the projects are booming. If you look at the past 2 years, Sino-US trade dropped, but Sino-African trade boomed. China trade with ASEAN countries boomed. So that shows BRI is working, and is working reasonably well. On the part of the West, I think they should try their effort to be really objective about China. I told BBC, I told the CNN, just tell the truth. You know, for instance, we have all kinds of surveys done by PW, by Ipsos, by Dahlia Research, by Harvard Kennedy School Ash Center. You know, all these opinion surveys show most Chinese think their country is on the right track.
Other than competition between the two, what major areas of bilateral cooperation can China and the U.S. focus on? How can both countries manage their differences in such a way as to restore and strengthen their ties?
We have existential threats. One of those existential threats is climate change. The United States and China absolutely must work together to combat climate change. If we don't, your generation is not going to have much of a world to enjoy, and that would be very, very sad. So that is clearly something we will work together on. Pandemic prevention, we still have not, we're dealing with this pandemic. I'm always disturbed when I get up in the morning and I see, competition in pandemic diplomacy. What? It should be cooperation in pandemic diplomacy. China's got vaccines, Russia's got vaccines, and America now has 3 safe vaccines. We should be working with China and Russia to distribute them globally. But clearly, there will be another pandemic in the future. And we, China, Russia, need to cooperate in order to confront that. So those are 2 critical things.
He said that these are what he called existential threat, which means a threat which can undermine the very existence of your people. So existential threat is a very big word, and I think he's right. This climate change and how to deal with this pandemic, how to deal with this climate change, and on at least these 2 issues, China and the United States have obviously common interests. We should work on this. We do have areas of competition, but we also have areas of cooperation. And I think this is Mr. Orlins' point, which I share 100%.
We're our economy, the world economy. China's coming back nicely. The United States will start coming back nicely come the 3rd quarter of 2019. and 21. So we'll see the U.S. and China leading economic growth, but we need to establish better mechanisms to coordinate economic growth. So that will benefit the people of the United States and the people of China. So we need to find ways to cooperate better, whether it's reestablishing some mechanism for high-level economic dialogue. China needs to reform a lot of its economic policies, but I think it's moving in that direction. We're seeing the new 5-year plan. We're seeing additional reform and opening. We're seeing financial services opening. We're seeing a lot of things going on, and that's beneficial to U.S.-China relations. Lower tariffs, more education, more Chinese expertise in the U.S. government. This whole list of things are good for the American people. So I think it's important the Chinese media understand and portray that accurately, that good U.S.-China relations are in the interests of the American people. And I advocate these policies because I believe they're in the interests of the American people, my children and my grandchildren.
No, I think he has a great insight, and indeed, it is his belief that it is in the interest of the American people to promote U.S. relations with China. I think this kind of belief that drives him to work for improving Sino-U.S. ties, which is great and admirable, especially at this time of tremendous odds against Sino-U.S. relations within the United States, given the rise of Cold War hawks. The Cold War is based on a concept called mutually assured destruction, MAD, MAD, mutually assured destruction. China and the United States have every reason to embrace what I call mutually assured prosperity. So we should really have a long-term thinking. You have no way to contain a country like China. It's very stupid to think so. No way. As I said, it's the largest economy by PPP, largest middle class, largest trading nation with 130 countries. You have no way to contain a country like China. So the best way is let's have a win-win cooperation and to use this MAP to replace this so-called MAD. Yeah, I think that will be the correct way forward. And to promote Sino-US relations is in the interest of both the American people and the Chinese people. On the part of Chinese, we should also do the same thing. Yeah.